Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Hail, hail, hail. Hail to the primal light. Hail to the primal light. Hail to the true light. Hail to the light throughout the ages. Hail to the transparent light. Hail to the light without beginning nor end. Hail, hail, hail. Hail to the primal light. Hail to the light throughout the ages. Hail, hail, hail. Hail to the primal light. I bow to the primal guru. I bow to the supreme eternal truth. I bow to the supreme eternal wisdom within. I bow to the great supreme intelligence within. I bow to the great supreme truth within. Hail, hail, hail. Hail to the primal light. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome to Steps to My True Self, Self Inquiry, and Self Realization. All is myself, and I alone exist. Hail to the primal light. So, our big topic today is identity crisis. And our question is, who am I? How do I identify? How did I come into being? What is the source of my existence, allowing me this world experience? So we are having an identity crisis. Let's remove all the layers to get down to the real self. Who am I at the core of my being? Let's take off all of these masks. Let's take off these avatars. Let's take off all of these things that we're wearing, that disguise that we're wearing, and let's get down to the core of our existence. For ages, humanity has been plagued by false self-identity. False self-identity has been the bane of our existence. It is time to get to the root of this issue. Yes, we must ask, who am I? How do I identify? Let's get to the root of our identity so that we can solve this problem once and for all. When you're asking, who am I? Who are you asking? Don't seek your answers outside of yourself. You have to go within the intelligence within you. Stop seeking your answer. Everybody in the world right now, know that we're under false self-identity. We're in an identity crisis. And this is the time when we need to solve this problem. Look at all the things that's going on in the world. Everybody needs to be sitting down in stillness and asking these questions with reverently to the self, to the intelligence within. Don't call on no God. Don't call on nothing. Just ask the intelligence, the supreme intelligence within. Who am I? How did I come into being? Talk to the self-supreme intelligence within. Who am I? The answer to this question is the problem in the world. The real and true answer to this question is also the solution to all our problems. It is time now for us to know the truth of our identity, because if everything is being created in a dream, can any of this be real? It means that everything is your imagination. Everything is within our imagination. So I want you to tell me, if all these things that you have gathered on yourself, is it real? Is it you or is it not you? You answer the question. Your culture, is it you? About your race, your ethnicity, is it you? About this body, your skin color, is it you? The mind, is it you? The ego character that you are exploring the world in and thinking it is yourself, is it you? You have to do some serious self-inquiry. Sit down in stillness and ask the intelligence and wake it up so it can speak the truth to you. Your sexual preference, this is a big one in our culture. Is your sexual preference yourself? Is it you? No, it's not you. Oh, I am gay, I am bisexual, I am this. I mean, all this ridiculous title, all these ridiculous camouflage, these disguises that you're putting on. You can't find yourself because you're lost in all of these unreal things, all these illusionary things. False self-identification, you're lost in all the things that you're identifying as you. This ego persona, all your likes and dislikes, is it you? It's not you. It's time for you now to face your truth. If everything is being created in a dream, can any of this be real? Can any of this be real? This body, is it real? Is this real? None of this is real. It's all, everything is your imagination, is our imagination. You must remove all these layers that is weighing you down and causing confusion and false self-identification. We have been making this loop and looping and looping and have not figured out the truth of who we are. People are caught up in their race and their color. I am Jews, I am Black, I am white, I am brown, I am Latino, I am Asian. Caught up in all of these things, these superficial things. Young people are very confused in our culture right now. And all we are teaching young people is that when they have a problem, they don't even self-inquire. What they do, they go and they start drinking, they start taking drugs and smoking. This is all what we have given them, how to solve problems. To run away from it and hide into a bottle, into drugs, to comatose yourself. This is what we're teaching young people. Who am I is the question you want to ask the self, the intelligence within. How do I identify? How you identify says a lot. It tells me what the understanding you have of yourself and the balance that you're bringing to yourself. How do you identify? Duality consciousness, the mind, has created an avatar to explore the world in. And this is the reason for our identity crisis. We have to get to the root of our identity. Let's move in and try to find out who we are. So we must know who we are, because when you don't know who you are, you're making false self-identification, you're making a guess. So let's see how the self come into being. False self-identification. You have to self-inquire so that you, the great intelligence, supreme intelligence within, will rise up to answer you. Who am I? How did I come into being? What is the source of my existence, allowing me this world experience? Identity crisis. We have to get to the root of our identity crisis, because the duality consciousness, the mind, has created an avatar to explore the world in. This monster. That's why we've been suffering from false self-identification. Because what are you identifying as? This mind, this ego character that you are exploring the world. You think it is yourself. You think this body is you. So let's get to the root of this issue and let's find out who you truly are. So what you will learn in the next slides: how did the self come into being? How the world was created. You'll learn about the duality of the visible duality world and the invisible duality world, a dream within a dream. You'll learn how we fragment ourselves before we come into the world, and how to come into self-realization to know the truth about ourselves. How the self came into being. So let's now get into finding out how we came into being, so we can stop identifying as the mind. Because you think you are the mind, and you think you are this body, and you think some mind created you. You think you are one of the dream characters, the ego is, but not the real self. Because if the mind created you, then that means that you created in the dream, and you cannot exit the dream, because you're only a dream character. But the real self is the real. That's why you have to know the truth of who you are. So how did the self come into being? Let's take a look at that. So the primordial self as an egg existed with the primordial witness self in stillness as the self atom or pure atom. The primordial self wanted to create, so the primordial witness self hit the primordial egg, the self atom, and there we have the Big Bang, split into tiny particles. All the self electrical particles move to one side, and all the pure consciousness, the magnetic particles, move to the other side, with void between them as the non-dual self spread out, unmanifest, infinite, formless, boundless, omnipresent, non-dual self. The self then makes a manifestation of itself in a baby form. And this self is the self manifest. This is where we have the void between the two energies, the electrical primal light energy and the magnetic consciousness energy. Indivisible, non-dual. This is how the self exists. The non-dual self then self-replicates first because it wants to create the duality cosmos. And so it creates the duality cosmos, and in the duality cosmos is where it's the self-supreme primal light, and she is going to build her duality world in the duality cosmos. Now, the non-dual self, self-supreme, self-manifest, now makes a baby self, which is the self-supreme primal light Aten Ra, so that self-supreme primal light can come into the world and create the duality world. Self-supreme primal light arises from self-manifest. Her consciousness arises from the pure consciousness. And this is a dual nature. They are twins. This is the feminine principle and the masculine principle. They go together as one. The self-supreme primal light rises, her sun rises with her and her consciousness. So what she's doing now, this is herself, she have her self-consciousness, her sun, she's gonna make a non-dual consciousness for herself because she wants to create the world. So here she goes, she takes her sun, she makes a replica of it, and she takes her consciousness and she put the void between, and she creates the non-dual consciousness that is her mind, because she wants to create the world and she needs her mind. The first thing that she's going to do, because she's making a duality world, this is her non-dual consciousness. She has to make self-replica, because you see, when she first came in, just one self. See, one self, but two separate energies. She have the light and the self-consciousness. She has her mind and she have her sun. She have void between herself and her self-consciousness, and between her mind, her consciousness, the mind. The self-supreme primal light wants to create the world. So what is she going to do? She makes self-replicas. She have her mind. She makes her first self-replica. Its self-consciousness arises. The first self-replica that she makes is the supreme teacher, the primal guru, and her self-consciousness arises, which is Osiris. And Osiris is now known as Shiva Shambhu because he has evolved himself, and he's now known as Shiva Shambhu, Osiris. Because the supreme teacher is going to be the one that is always going to be with us. The baby self of Earth is always laying within us dormant, and that's the self of Earth that is going to help all of the selves when they come into the world, to help them to return back to their truth. So you have a baby supreme teacher laying dormant within you, and you have to wake it up. That's how it will teach you about who you are, because the teacher is within you to teach you. So every self is with a purpose. So her next self replica is Supreme Ra, because Supreme Ra is going to be the self of Earth that's going to create the world. And Supreme Ra self-consciousness arise, and that's Set. Supreme Ra is the self of Earth that is creating and managing the world, and has the duality consciousness, which is Brahma. Then she makes one more self-replica, and this is Nut, and Nut becomes the sky, and its self-consciousness arise, which is the Archangel Gabriel. Here's our self. This is all our self. This is how the first supreme self came into being. The self-supreme primal light, all of us, we are her baby self. So these are our self-replicas. How we came into the world, we came in as a baby, her baby, just like how she is the baby of the self-manifest. The self-manifest is the baby of the self-unmanifest, and the self-supreme primal light is the baby of the self-manifest. And we are the baby of the self-supreme primal light, Aten Ra. So that's how we came into the world. And we also do the same thing too. All right, so let's just move on to the next slide. So this is how we came into the world. As you can see, we are the baby self of the self-supreme. We were never created. We came into being, and we are exploring the world. And so this is the non-duality consciousness with the light, where we're in awareness of ourselves, and we wrote out our destiny. When we're coming into the world now, we are given this consciousness, the duality consciousness, which there is no light, and we're not in awareness of ourselves because we have to go into sleeping. So this is what happened now. The duality consciousness, this is a tainted consciousness and a sick consciousness. This is the root of our identity crisis. We come into the world, you know what happened? This duality consciousness trick and deceive the self. The self was supposed to rise up and explore the world using the mind, but it never happened. The mind trapped the self still sleeping in the dream, and the mind created an avatar to explore the world instead of the self rising up to explore the world. This has been why we are identifying ourselves as the mind, this ego character that we're exploring the world in. So this is the truth of how we fragment ourselves before we come into the world. So first we have the self unmanifest, and then he makes a self unmanifest, make a baby self, which is the self manifest. The self manifest, make a baby self, which is the self supreme primal light, Aten Ra. The self supreme primal light makes self replicas of ourselves to be the supreme self, to be, those are the self that are going to be managing the world with her. And then she makes our baby selves and send them out into the world, which we are. We are the baby selves. Yeah, and here's a chart that self-replicas of the primal light and their self-consciousness. So you can always come back to this video and look at it. Our first self-replica was the Primal Guru. The self-consciousness is Osiris. Our second self-replica, Supreme Ra, and Supreme Ra self-consciousness is Set. Her third self-replica is Nut, and its self-consciousness is Gabriel. And so once we came into the world, we're given the duality consciousness. And so that's where our problem started, with the false self-identification. Here is how we fragment ourselves and come into the world. And we do the same thing as what the self-supreme primal light did, except that we're only making 2 self-replicas and 1 baby self. So when we come into the world as a baby self, then our self-consciousness also arises. We are the feminine principle, the masculine principle, make 1 self, the twins, and we explore the world like that. So when we rise, our self-consciousness rise. So we make a self-replica, we write out our destiny, we make a self-replica write out the destiny with us, we make another self-replica, so 2 self-replicas we make. The primal light makes 3 and we make 2. And then we make a baby self and we carry the baby self within us. In the body with us, the baby self is with us. So one of this self enter the world in a body, and the next self enter the world disembodied, did not come in a body. One of this self enter the world in a body, the next one came in disembodied, not in a body. This is how we fragment ourselves and come into the world. So you have another self of yours out there in a body. You have another 2 self of yours exploring the world disembodied as the magnetic beings, the gods, them that everybody is worshiping. Let's get to the root of our issue. And what's at the root of our issue of this identity crisis, this false self-identity? The mind. The mind is at the root of our false self-identity. Humanity have been worshiping the mind for ages. All of the gods, them, they are the mind character. They are the ego character that arises from the mind. The mind created using its imagination to create an avatar, and all of the selves been entranced in the sleep, and the mind, its character rose up and take precedent over the self. And so we have been exploring the world in the mind, and this is the reason why we have this false self-identity, because we think that we are the mind. When we came into being, we had this, the light consciousness, the non-dual consciousness, the mind with the light. So we are in awareness, we're in truth, and we're in the real. When we come into the world, because it's a dream, we're given this consciousness, in the duality consciousness, darkness, where there is no light. This is the problem. How do we heal from this mental sickness and from the self-ignorance? We have to know to illuminate ourselves. What have we been doing in this darkness in the mind? We've been worshiping the mind. and we thinking the mind is ourself. And so we must gain control over our minds. We have no control over the mind, and this is what the problem is. We must gain control over the mind, this ego. You must castrate this ego because it is the false self, and it must return from whence it came, this avatar, so that the real self can rise up, so you can identify yourself, your true self. What have we been doing? We've been exploring the world as the mind. So the duality consciousness is called Brahma. The non-dual consciousness is called Brahman, and that is the mind of the self-supreme primal light, Aten Ra. Brahma is the mind of supreme self, Supreme Ra. Supreme Ra is herself that is dreaming up the world. Her mind is. She is the one that is managing and creating the world in a dream. And our mind is the duality consciousness. It is the tainted consciousness. It is very deceptive and cannot be trusted. So how do we return to truth? How do you return to your true nature? The mind of the world is very sick. The mind of our dual nature exploring the world, disembodied, is sick and deranged. The mind of the human beings are sick and deranged. How do we return to balance? This mind that is in darkness must return back to the light. Light must turn on, it must return back to its truth. So what we're gonna do is we have to make sure that we are illuminating ourselves. We have to castrate in this ego, because we are not this mind, we are not this body, we are not this ego. False self-identification. We have to get to the root of our issue, which is the mind. We have to solve it by first we have to get rid of this character that the mind dreamed up, this avatar that is exploring the world and is holding the self in prison. We have to get rid of this character and get to the root, and so that we can finally awake and see ourselves and stop exploring the world as baby consciousness. You're exploring the world as baby consciousness in a body. The gods them are exploring the world as baby consciousness, disembodied. It's time to wake up from sleeping. Wake your backside up. You have a baby supreme teacher laying dormant within you, and you have to wake it up. That's all it will teach you about who you are. Because the teacher is within you to teach you. You just have to self-inquire to the intelligence within you to wake it up, and it's gonna wake up and speak to you. You must know that this world is a dream. This is the dream of consciousness. We have entered inside someone's dream. Let me say that again. We have entered inside someone's dream. We come into the dream to explore the dream. You must see things the way that they are. This is a dream world, dream creations, dream things, dream body. This dream is coming to an end. We have this dream body so that we can explore this dream world. The dreamer will wake up from sleeping. Consciousness have to wake up, and all the supreme selves have to wake up, and all of you human beings, yourself is sleeping and you are living in the ego. You must wake up. This world is illusionary in nature, and things are not what they seem. You must see things the way that they actually are. Awake from the dream. You are not who you think you are. Awake, 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 awake from the dream. Self-realization is the key. Who am I? What is the source of my existence? You have to self-inquire. You will not know if you don't self-inquire, because the self will not rise up to answer you. You have to inquire so that your self will rise up and answer you. Self-inquire to know. I seek my truth from within. I trust my inner supreme truth. I trust my inner supreme teacher. I trust my inner supreme wisdom. I trust my inner supreme intelligence. Seek your truth from within. Please practice stillness. time now for us to come to our truth and know our truth. Yes, all is myself and I alone exist. I am honoring myself. You have the self-love and self-devotion. You have to bring the mind in stillness and bring it down into the heart so that you can purify it, so you can have oneness with it, because in this duality, you need the mind to move parallel with you and you're in harmony with it. You cannot have it controlling you. You have to be able to have the mind do what you ask it to do and need it to do. So you have to be in charge. So we have to turn on the inward, start honoring ourselves in stillness, self-love, and self-devotion. Hail to the primal light. Hail to the light throughout the ages. Hail to the true light. Hail to the transparent light. Hail to the light without beginning or end. Hail, hail, hail. Hail to the primal light. I bow to the primal guru, the supreme teacher within. I bow to the great supreme eternal truth within. I bow to the great supreme wisdom within. I bow to the great supreme intelligence within. Hail, 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 hail to the primal light. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I am Primal Light, prepared for the world with identity all set. I am the daughter of the Self-Supreme, Primal Light. I am the liberator and advocate for all souls. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like, please share, please practice stillness. Please practice self-inquiry so you can come into self-realization. Thank you so much. I bow to you in love, in light, and in truth. All is myself and I alone exist. Hail to the primal light. May all beings be filled with love, light, and truth. May all beings be self-luminous. May all beings return to balance and harmony, the non-duality. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Please leave a comment. Please share.